Thank you all for coming out. I am not under the impression you came to hear me. It was the free breakfast, I know that. But thank you all very much for coming out. And let me begin by saying that in this state, we are going to work as hard as we can for every vote. We did well last time, and I want to thank everybody for their help, but we take nothing for granted. We had two great town meetings last night. I'm going to do another one today, and we'll be back in this state a whole lot. So I don't have to tell anybody here how important New Hampshire is to the primary process. And with your help, we are not only going to win here, but we're going to win the Democratic nomination. And then we are going to defeat the worst president in the modern history of this country. And I'm not much into polls, and polls are wrong, and they go up and they go down, but you should know that every credible poll done, I think in the last year, has us beating Donald Trump. Poll came out the other day, we beating him nationally by 8 points. So I think we could beat him and beat him badly. And the reason that we have got to defeat Trump is the reason that all of you know. The United States cannot continue to have a president who is a racist, who is a sexist, who is a homophobe, who is a religious bigot, who is a xenophobe, and it was also a pathological liar. That is not the kind of person who should be in the White House. And I think, when I say that, there are many conservatives and Republicans that understand that as well. Look, we can disagree in a democracy on ideas, and we'll talk about some of the ideas today. But I think nobody thinks that it is worthy of our great country that we have somebody who lies every single day. I think the media now has documented over 10,000 lies that he has told since he's president, and that's just not acceptable. So we have, it seems to me, two jobs in front of us. Number one, we have got to defeat Trump, but the second thing that we have got to do, and what this campaign is absolutely about, is transforming the economy and the government of the United States so that it works for all of us and not just the 1%. Yeah. And in that regard, I want to thank the people of New Hampshire for playing a very, very significant role in helping to transform politics in America. And it's not just my gratitude for you for having enabled me to win here last time, but more importantly, when I came to New Hampshire 4 years ago, I talked about a series of ideas that the establishment and the media thought were radical ideas, and they were extreme ideas, and they wouldn't go anyplace. All right? 4 years ago, I said that if you work 40 hours a week here in the United States, you should not be living in poverty, that we got to raise that minimum wage to a living wage, $15 an hour. 4 years ago, that was a radical idea. Well, guess what's happened since? 7 states have passed a $15 an hour minimum wage, and the U.S. House of Representatives passed a $15 an hour minimum wage. So when people speak and say, you know what, Bernie's right, people should not be working for 10, 11 bucks an hour. And all over the country, people are saying that. That's how change takes place. And the most important message of this campaign, whether it's the minimum wage or anything else, is the only way that change takes place is the bottom on up, never the top down. All right? And that is what is going on right now, and that is the history of real change in America, whether it is the labor movement, the civil rights movement, the women's movement, the gay movement, the environmental movement. It's never some president waking up one day saying, you know, I got a good idea. I think I'm going to sign something. It's when millions of people change consciousness in this country and demand that that president and that Congress do the right thing. So raising the minimum wage is an important step forward. Let me give you another example of the changes that we're seeing, and I get the opportunity, the privilege, as a presidential candidate to go all over the country. 4 years ago, I came here to New Hampshire, and I said, you know what? The world is changing. The economy is changing. Technology is changing. And we need to change our educational system to correspond to that reality. And that means for 100 years or whatever, we had public education, free public education being K through 12. And you know what? 30, 40 years ago, you graduated high school, you can go out and get a job, make it into the middle class. Increasingly, that is not the case today. So 4 years ago, I said, we've got to make public colleges and universities tuition free. Well, that was also perceived as a radical and extreme idea. Well, you know what's happening today? All over the country, states and cities and counties are moving in exactly that direction. 4 years ago, I came here to New Hampshire and I said there's something wrong when we are punishing our young people for the quote-unquote crime of getting a higher education and having them leave school $50,000, $100,000, and go to graduate school $200,000 in debt. And what my view is now, which is also being opposed by many establishment folks, is we have to cancel all student debt in this country. Now, my point is that sounds like a radical idea, and people say, well, you know, how are you going to do that? How do you pay for that? And here is what also our campaign is about. It is asking people to think outside of the box. Don't look at the paradigm just the way the media or Congress ask you to look at it. They say, well, we could do this or this, but we can't do a big thing. And if this campaign is about anything, it's asking people to ask the simple question of why not? Why can't we do it? Why was it acceptable for the Congress, against my vote, to bail out the crooks, and they are crooks, on Wall Street who destroyed our economy back in 2008? That was okay. We had to do it, so we said. But when it comes to an entire generation of young people today who are struggling, paying off their student debt, young people who can't get married and have kids, can't afford to buy a house, can't even get a car. Well, we can't do that. That's too radical. 2 years ago, Donald Trump and his friends, against my vote, needless to say, gave $1.1 trillion in tax breaks to the top 1% and large profitable corporations, such that companies like Amazon that made $10 billion last year did not pay a nickel in federal income tax. That's okay. Hey, that's the way we do it. But helping 45 million people, many of them young people, by canceling their student debt, that is unthinkable. We can't do it. So what this campaign is about is asking the American people to consider, why not? Why can't we do it? Right now in this country, you got 3 people that own more wealth than the bottom half of the American people. You're not going to see that on TV very often. You're not going to read about it in the newspapers. Where is the outrage? Is that what we grew up to expect in America, an economy in which 3 people own more wealth than the bottom half of the American people? Top 1% own more wealth than the bottom 92%? In Vermont and here and all over this country, you got working people who are working 2 or 3 jobs, working 50, 60, 70 hours a week. 49% of all new income goes to the top 1%. Are we allowed to talk about it? Is that an issue? Damn right it is an issue. And we have got to talk about it. But what I'm getting at is you cannot allow other people to determine for you what is the outrage, what is right or wrong, because they will give you very few options. It is increasingly understood that our healthcare system today is dysfunctional. All right? All over the country, people know it is a failed system. And yet people say, well, yeah, maybe we could do this. Maybe we could come up with a 500-page program and we'll cover you if your income is this and that, and only this deductible and that copayment. Question, why cannot we, the most powerful, wealthiest nation on earth, do what virtually every other major country does and guarantee health care to all people as a human right? Why not? So I want to talk about the healthcare system, because we are going to make this a pivotal part of this campaign. There's so many issues out there. I mean, one of the problems we face, the media asks is, well, what do you think the most important issue is? I never know what to say, because there is no one important issue. There's so many important issues. We'll touch on some of them. But certainly at the top of the list, as one of the most important issues, is healthcare. So let's talk about the current healthcare system, okay? Current healthcare system today, we got 87 million Americans who have either no health insurance or are underinsured. Now, the underinsured is a very important part of the discussion, which doesn't get the attention that it deserves. So if you have some health insurance program that is such a weak program, it doesn't allow you to go to the doctor, you're insured, no problem. You got insurance. But that's not good enough. So you got 87 million people uninsured or underinsured, which means that many of those people do not go to the doctor when they should. Go out and talk to your physician. Doctor you go to and ask them how many people have died because they walked into the doctor's office much too late after they noticed their symptoms. And the answer is, nationally, we lose about 30,000 people every single year who die unnecessarily. Their death could have been prevented. And then on top of that, you have in this country, and this is really quite unbelievable, you got working people paying 20, 30% of their incomes on health care, yeah, all right? And they can't afford it, and the cost of health insurance is going up, and often that health insurance is not particularly adequate. We spoke to a woman yesterday in Wolfboro. She got up at the meeting and she said, all right, my situation is I have a health insurance program, not particularly good, but I'm spending about $10,000 a year on premiums, and I got a $4,000 deductible. It's a middle-class woman, $14,000 before she even pays the first copayment and the insurance kicks in. Then on top of all of that, and this is equally unbelievable, 500,000 Americans go bankrupt every single year. Just talked to a woman yesterday. 2 kids with autism. Spent $200,000 taking care of her kids. She went bankrupt. Take a step back. Think big. Do you really think that in a civilized, democratic society, people should go bankrupt or end up in financial distress? For what reason? Because they were diagnosed with cancer or a heart disease? Is that a reason to go bankrupt? 500,000 Americans go bankrupt every single year. Then you got the equally insane situation where 1 out of 5 Americans cannot afford the prescription drugs they need. Some of you may know a couple of weeks ago I went up to Windsor, Ontario with a group of folks from the Midwest who were diabetic. We went to Windsor to buy insulin, the same exact product that they bought here in the United States. In Canada, they paid 1/10 the price for insulin compared to what they pay in the United States. 1/10 the price. I learned on that trip, I didn't know this, 7.5 million people use insulin in this country. A quarter of them ration their insulin use, which is totally destructive and insane. We went there to Canada with a young man who was a football player. He lied to his parents. Parents didn't have a whole lot of money, and they were already spending enough money on him. He lied to his parents and said, well, I've got plenty of insulin, don't worry. And in fact, he was rationing his insulin. He became quite sick. And this is going on all over America. Now, that's the bad news. Let me give you the good news about our healthcare system for some people. Last year, the top 10 drug companies made $69 billion in profit. $69 billion, and they can charge you any price they want at any time. You got medicine you've been using for 20 years, walk into the pharmacy tomorrow, price could double. Nobody legally can stop them from doing that. The insurance companies last year, top 6 companies made $23 billion. So the health insurance industry made $100 billion in profit, and the American people are spending, we are spending as a nation, twice as much per capita on health care as do the people of any other country. All right. That's where we are right now. And what I hear all over this country is the American people are sick and tired of a healthcare system designed to make billions in profit for the insurance companies and the drug companies. They want a healthcare system that guarantees quality healthcare to all people, freedom of choice regarding your doctor or your hospital, no co-payments, no deductibles, no premiums, no out-of-pocket expenses. And when we do that, we will save the vast majority of the American people substantial sums of money on what they're spending on health care right now, which is why we need a Medicare for all single-payer system. That's what the American people want. And we've come a long way in 4 years. Poll after poll after poll says that if you ask the American people, do you want to expand Medicare to cover everybody? Freedom of choice, doctor, hospital, no co-payments, no deductibles, no out-of-pocket expenses. The American people overwhelmingly say yes. Why aren't we moving in that direction as a government? And the answer is not complicated. It's the same story as in many other areas. When you have an industry that made $100 billion in profit last year, if they spend 1% of their profits, 1%, fighting Medicare for all, that will be $1 billion, which means here in New Hampshire, you're going to see a whole lot of TV ads telling you how terrible Medicare for all is. Some of you may have seen, I don't know if any of you saw the CNN debate a few weeks ago. And right in the middle of the damn debate, where we're talking about Medicare for all, there are the drug companies and the insurance companies telling you how terrible Medicare for all is, lying as usual. So that's what we're up against. But that speaks not only to healthcare, but the corruption of the political system. We are stuck with a dysfunctional, terrible healthcare system perpetrated by the profits of the healthcare industry who can spend as much money as they want in the political process. And that is what this campaign is about. It's not only taking on the healthcare industry, not only taking on the pharmaceutical industry, and by the way, on the Medicare for all, we will cap prescription drug spending at $200 per person, and we will substantially lower the cost of prescription drugs in this country. But on it goes. And what this campaign is about is not only taking on the insurance companies and the drug companies, it's taking on the other powerful corporate entities who, to a very significant degree, control the economic and political life of this country. So when we speak in our campaign about this being a campaign of us, not me, that's what we're talking about. I am the only candidate running for president who will tell you a simple truth that you're not going to see on TV or read in the papers. And that simple truth is that no president, not Bernie Sanders or anybody else, can do it alone. Can't do it alone. Even the best intentioned, most honest president cannot do it alone because we are taking on enormous power in the corporate elite. You take it on Wall Street, made $100 billion in profit last year. You're taking on the insurance industry. You're taking on the pharmaceutical industry. You're taking on the military-industrial complex. You are taking on the fossil fuel industry. You're taking on the prison industrial complex. You think a president walks in there and says, hey, guys, we got to change. Got to change our values. They say, oh, Bernie, we hadn't thought of that. You're right. Healthcare is a human right. Climate change, very serious issue. You convinced us, Bernie. That ain't the way it works. And it's important that we understand how it works. Not a lesson you're going to see on the TV. And the only way, getting back to the point a minute ago, the only way change takes place is when millions of people stand up and demand that change. And that is what this campaign is about. You know, Jane and I thought long and hard about whether we wanted to do this, because running for president is not easy, as you can imagine. Okay, we're taking on that it was not just good enough to defeat Trump, that if we are going to make permanent change in America, we need to transform the economics of this country and the politics of this country, and we think we are the best campaign to do that as well. Now, I want to raise a couple of other issues, staying on the same theme. And this is, again, what I'm begging you to think about, is why real change never takes place. Think about 45 years, you got great politicians, honest people, giving great speeches, telling you all the things they want to do. And yet today in America, the average American worker is making, in real inflation accounted for dollars, exactly what he or she made 45 years ago. How does that happen? How does it happen that over the last 30 years, listen to this, top 1% has seen a $21 trillion increase in their wealth? 30 years, $21 trillion going to the top 1%. Bottom 50% have seen a $900 billion decline in their wealth. How does that happen? And it happens because you have a corporate establishment who is incredibly greedy. They want it all. They want more tax breaks for billionaires. They want to cut Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, education, environmental protection. That is what we are up against. And that is what we have to confront. But at the end of the day, they are the 1%. We are the 99%, and 99 is a lot bigger number than 1, if we utilize that. Two other points I want to make, and then we'll open it up. And again, I want you to think outside of the box and how you approach these issues. With the exception of Donald Trump, almost everybody in America understands that climate change is real, is caused by human activity, and is already resulting in severe damage to our country and all over the world. And you all know that the scientists have told us that we have fewer than 12 years to transform our energy system globally, or else this planet will suffer irreparable, underlying irreparable damage. Ask yourself a question. How does it happen right now that you got a fossil fuel industry making tens of billions of dollars a year, selling a product that is destroying the planet? Hell of a product to be selling, huh? What do we say about those people? What do we say about the drug company executives who sit around in a room and price fix and raise prices so that people can't afford it, and some will die or get much sicker than they should? So what we need is a movement that stands up to that greed and tells the fossil fuel industry, sorry, the future of this planet and the well-being of our kids and our grandchildren is more important than your short-term profits. All right? And it's not different on another issue that I don't even like to talk about this issue because it is so unspeakable and painful. But you all know what happened in El Paso. You know what happened in Dayton. You know what's happened in communities all over this country. And it really is. I don't feel comfortable talking about it. To imagine demented people walking into a school. I mean, it is unspeakable. Nobody has any magical answer. You got 400 million guns in America. You got a lot of demented people out there. You got, we think, more than 10 million assault weapons out there on the streets of this country, more than the United States military has. So nobody has any magical answer, but the overwhelming majority of the people in rural communities like ours in Vermont and New Hampshire, urban communities, what the American people are begging us, do something, do the best you can. Maybe you can't solve it all, but do something. Why is the United States Senate not doing anything? And the answer is very simple. You got a Republican Party intimidated by the NRA. That's about it. End of discussion. Now, we can disagree, and I'll tell you what I think. You know, people will disagree. All right, what do we do here? What do we do there? How do we solve it? Let's have that discussion. But everybody in America believes we should do something except the Republican leadership who are intimidated by the NRA. Overwhelmingly, the American people understand we have got to expand background checks. How hard is that? All right? You know, not a very radical idea that somebody who had criminal tendencies or is unstable emotionally should not own a gun. Not very hard to figure that one out. Got to do away with the gun show loophole so that people cannot legally buy guns by circumventing the background check. Got to do away with the straw man provision by which you can walk into a gun shop, legally buy a dozen guns, and then sell them to criminal elements. And in my view, and I think increasingly, it's been my view for 30 years, and increasingly the view of the American people, we have to ban the sale and distribution of assault weapons in this country. But once again, this issue, it's not going to come to the United States Senate. Why? The NRA doesn't want it to come. We're not going to lower prescription drugs in America. Why? Pharmaceutical industry doesn't want it. We're not going to move to Medicare for all today. Why? The insurance companies don't want it. And what we have got to do is finally transform American politics so that maybe, and I know this is a really radical idea, that we have a Congress and a president who listen to the needs of the American people and not just wealthy special interest in this country. Okay, gone on too long as usual. Any questions or comments? See the woman right there. Yes, ma'am. Let's get you a mic. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Bernie, for
everything. Let her hold it.
You
You hold it. Just put it up to your mouth.
Thank you, Bernie, for all that you're doing for the middle class, and I agree with what you said today. My question is on the environmental issues. There's a lot of stuff going across President Trump's desk, so to speak, in regard to the endangered species, dumping chemicals into water. What is your take on that, and what would you do to help bring those animals back into a safe space and the environment back?
Trump,
Thank you.
you're right. It's not just climate change. It is environmental protection in general, and I could broaden your question to talk about water quality in this country. You know, you may or may not know this, but I mean, all over this country, we all saw what happened in Flint. And people say, oh, my God, how could that happen in a major American city? Take a look at Newark and take a look at communities all over this country. What you got in Trump, you know, there's nothing to be surprised about. This is a guy who lied during his campaign. He said, I am a different type of Republican. I'm going to stand with the working class of America. It was a total lie. In terms of environmental protection, he will always stand with the polluters and the large corporations. So if it's a question of drilling oil in a region rather than preserving open space, you know where he'll go. And he does that all the time. But your point is well taken. It's not just climate change. It is, we are concerned about the quality of our water. We're concerned about the Endangered Species Act. My God, we are losing species after species. What a terrible thing. You know, for not only in the United States, but all over the world. You're looking at Brazil, deforestation, massive deforestation. So your point is a very important point. Look, you know, what can you say? We got one planet. And if we don't preserve it for the children and our grandchildren, what kind of custodians of the planet are we? So thank you for the question. Okay.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Emma. I grew up in rural Vermont, and the 2020 election is actually going to be the first time I'm able to vote for president. Even though I couldn't vote in 2016, I was really inspired seeing you as a politician representing me as a Jewish Vermonter on the national stage. And for too long, I felt really let down by politicians who only represent a Jewish voice that's completely uncritical of Israel. So I've been really inspired seeing you change the conversation, and even recently mentioning leveraging aid to pressure the Israeli government to end the occupation. I'm part of a generation that understands that opposition to the occupation is a Jewish moral imperative. And I'd like to know, what do you think, why does it matter to you to fight to end the occupation?
Two things. Let me answer your question in two ways. First of all, I am delighted that you're involved in the political process. And let me say to your generation, all right, and I don't mean this rhetorically, you are, not just because of your age, you're the future of this country. And, all right, when we talk about the political process, I'm going to get to your question, not running away from it. What Republicans are doing in this state, by the way, and all over the country, is trying to make it harder for people your age to vote, okay? Because they're cowards, all right? When you represent the wealthy and the powerful, and you don't have an agenda that appeals to ordinary people, the way you win elections is making it harder for ordinary people to vote. So in this state, they were particularly targeting young people. In other states, they're targeting poor people or people of color, all right? And one of the goals, one of the slight differences we have with the Republican leadership is we think we should make it easier for people to vote, not harder for people to vote. Second of all, if your generation, and by your generation I mean people say 35 or younger, voted in the same percentage as people 65 years of age or older, we would transform this country. And one of the things, turns out, thank God, that your generation is the most progressive young people's generation in the modern history of this country. Okay? That's the good news. And 2 out of 3 young people are progressive. Problem is that young people don't vote in the percentages that they should. Now, we are seeing some changes in that. In 2018, young people voted at the highest percentage that they have in 70 years. But it is still not enough, all right? So please, the future of this country means getting young people involved in the political process, getting them to the polls. And when we do that, we will beat Trump and beat him badly. Okay, number 2, your question. All right. Look, I was, it's a funny thing. All that I have ever said on this issue is that U.S. foreign policy should be even-handed. That's all, even-handed. And that we respect Israel. Israel has every right in the world to live in peace and security. But so do the Palestinian people. So do the Palestinian people. And as somebody who is proudly Jewish, to be critical of a right-wing Netanyahu government in Israel is not to be anti-Semitic. So what you want, you have a situation, and by the way, the fault is not all with Israel. You got very poor and corrupt Palestinian leadership. But what the goal of the United States has got to be is to bring people in the region together, the Palestinians and the Israelis, to create a kind of workable peace which works for both parties, not just one. And your point is well taken. The United States government gives a whole lot of money to Israel, and I think we can leverage that money to end some of the racism that we have recently seen in Israel. But it's not only Israel and the Palestinians. It has to do with Saudi Arabia and Iran. For decades, the United States has said, we love those lovely people in Saudi Arabia. Just good pals of ours, good allies of ours, but we hate the Iranians. Well, You can criticize both, but let's just talk about Saudi Arabia for a minute. This is a country that treats women not as second-class citizens, but as third-class citizens. People do not march in Saudi Arabia with picket signs. They go to jail. This is a corrupt, murderous regime. Why have they been our allies for so many years? So once again, having to do with oil, various other reasons, especially, Trump and his job is to use our clout to bring people together, to say we are not going to be engaged in endless wars in the Middle East, but you better sit down and we'll facilitate that to try to bring peace to the region. So thank you for your question. Yeah, gentleman right here.
I'm a physician who's very strongly in favor of Medicare for all.
Thank you.
But I want to know how you propose to deal with the huge economic dislocation that would come from transformation to that kind of system.
Okay, and that's a good question. And it's not a different question than dealing with climate change, is it? I mean, when you deal with climate change, you're also going to have dislocation. So what we talk about is a just adjustment. In other words, we do not punish. Our goal is not to punish people who are now doing billing, for example, or working for the insurance industry, but to help them and support them. And that's part of our legislation, move to different types of jobs within healthcare. I'd rather, when you move to Medicare for all and more people are going to be walking into your office and needing hospital care that they can't get today, we're going to need more workers in the healthcare industry. We need more. And we will train some of the people to move in that direction. But we need a just respect, a just transition process for those people. But at the end of the day, what we need are, in fact, more doctors. We need doctors in rural areas. We need more nurses. We need in terms of the election, we faced the choice. We had a when we talk about education, how do we have a situation where teachers all over this country are working 2 or 3 jobs, where teachers are taking money out of their own pockets to buy classroom supplies, where young people who otherwise, everything being equal, would like to get into education right now are hesitating because they can get jobs that pay a hell of a lot more than $37,000 a year. So if we are serious about loving our children and wanting them to do best, we have got to respect educators in this country and give them the support that they need. So Mallory, that is an issue we are going to pay a lot of attention to. All right, maybe one more question. Okay, woman over there, yep.
Hi, thank you so much. My name's Sadie. First, I wanted to thank you, Senator, for being a champion of reproductive health care and co-sponsoring the Global HER Act to repeal Trump's global gag rule. My question is, how soon after taking office would you repeal the global gag rule and the Helms Amendment, and how would you do that?
Well, I think, if I am not mistaken, you can do that with an executive order, and I would do that on my first day, all right? I think... Look, it is unbelievable to me, and it is incredible hypocrisy that we have conservative Republicans who go around the country, and I hear this every day in the Senate, and they say, we believe in small government, right? We want to get the government out of the backs, off of the backs of the American people. You're free to do whatever you want. Big, bad government, deregulate, leave the American people alone. Do what you want. Except if you are a woman who has a very difficult decision to make. So I kind of believe that that decision should be made by the women of this country and not by politicians. Okay, let me thank all of you for being here this morning. We have to get on and do a couple of other things. At the end of the day, we are in an unprecedented moment in American history. And I speak not just as a U.S. Senator and not just as a presidential candidate, but just to tell you that I never, ever would have believed that we would have a president of the United States who is an overt racist and xenophobe and a sexist. I never would have believed that, and that's what we got. And that is not what the American people want. So together we have 2 things that we have got to do. Number 1, we have got to defeat Donald Trump, and number two, and I'm going to need your help the day after we are inaugurated. Number 2, we begin the process of taking on very powerful corporate interest and transforming this country so that we have a government and an economy that works for all of us, not just wealthy campaign contributors. Thank you all very much. Do we have time?